Hello and welcome to Home Truths, where we talk about the biggest talking points from around the world. And the biggest talking point right now is the scandal in British politics. A crazy 48 hours that came to a head today with Boris Johnson's second briefing to the public since his recovery from COVID-19. A second briefing that was forced upon him with many calls from Tory MPs asking for the resignation of Dominic Cummings. Well, as you know, the resignation did not happen. Dominic Cummings still has his job as Britain's leading political advisor to the Prime Minister. But I think what is important is to go through what has happened in the last 48 hours. Pretty defining moments of this pandemic and an indictment of how the government has dealt with this pandemic from the start. A very erratic response from start to today. We've had 37,000 deaths nearly as of today, according to the government's figures. Nearly 65,000 actually, if you take into account ONS figures. But let's not talk about that. That's a whole different topic. Let's talk about the past 48 hours. The past 48 hours started with the Guardian and the Mirror breaking a story together about Dominic Cummings breaking lockdown rules while he had coronavirus after he tested positive. His wife also tested positive, and he travelled to Durham, 260 miles away from his London home, to drop his kids off to his parents' house in order for them to take care of them. Think about that for a second. Dominic Cummings, who had the virus with his wife in a car with his children, driving 260 miles over 4 hours to go to his second home so his children could be cared for. And that's a story that broke. And throughout the day, we saw a lot of Tory cabinet members come out in very vocal support of Dominic Cummings. Before anything else, Twitter was livid. Social media was going off on Dominic Cummings because Britain has now been effectively locked down for over 2 months. People are getting stressed. People are getting angry that the government has not been dealing with it properly, and they've seen the fact that the top political advisor in the country has been given leeway to do whatever he wants, basically. And the Tory cabinet members came out in their numbers, in their droves. Rishi Sunak, Matt Hancock, Dominic Raab, Alok Sharma, Priti Patel chimed in with a few retweets, all saying, "Do not politicize this virus." Well, that response in itself has ensured that the virus has now become politicized, if it wasn't before. Because Dominic Cummings is a massive, massive player in the Tory party politics game. And it is a game because they're treating the public like it's a game, like it's a simulation. They're not treating human beings as if they're human beings. They're blatantly lying to their faces. And after this wide support by these cabinet members, the Mirror and Guardian did a very interesting maneuver, which was to drop a second story, joint story again, saying that Dominic Cummings broke lockdown laws for a second time. This time after he recovered from the virus, he travelled from London, Downing Street. He was in Downing Street around the time where Boris Johnson was recovering as well, and went back to Durham for sightseeing. What is it to see in Durham that's so important to break lockdown laws and put people's lives in danger? Absolutely nothing. And Boris Johnson, he today came with pretty sharp words, to defend Dominic Cummings, words such as he was using his initiative to make a decision to help his children. He was adhering to the guidelines. These are all words that were actually shoved down the throats of the British public when the pandemic started. Initiative, adhering to social distancing, adhering to the guidelines, and it's just lies. It's clearly lies, um, because we were told explicitly from the start: do not leave your homes unless it's essential, right? So, what is essential about um, about going to Durham for sightseeing? Nothing is essential about that, and this just shows that the government, it just loves lying through their teeth and getting away with it. And it shows what kind of a man and what kind of politician Boris Johnson is, that he keeps doing this and getting away with it. He is now following in the footsteps of Trump, where he thinks that if enough scandals pile on, you can't pin him down on a single issue. If you mess up enough times, people will forget about the last 100 times you messed up, and they might focus on one thing, and then that one thing will be forgotten about in another few weeks. But I think this one thing, this Dominic Cummings issue, is not one that's going to be forgotten about. It's not one that's going to be brushed away with a lazy press conference where you're hissing and sighing and laughing at the media. It's not going to go away. People are livid. People have not been able to see loved ones. People have watched their loved ones being buried on Zoom. People have not been allowed to leave their homes. People have not had the money to live life, the quality of life that they deserve. People do not have the strength to go through this virus. People are losing their lives. Doctors are losing their lives. Bus drivers are losing their lives because of this virus. And you've got the government's top political advisor breaking these laws. What kind of country is this? What is going on? Questions have to be asked. And the fact that a lot of the response on social media has been kind of been aimed negatively at the media for merely doing their job, for holding the government to account, as the media should, as the fourth estate, as you all know, hold the government to account. And yes, the media wasn't adequately doing that during the election or the months after that. But during this pandemic, they've been pretty spot on, especially in the last couple of weeks, because since Britain now has the highest death toll in Europe, questions have to be asked. And the fact that Tory supporters, Tory ministers, Tory officials, the Prime Minister feel a certain way about people asking the right questions speaks volumes of their character as politicians and as human beings. Because if you can mess up so many times, and this is the icing on the cake, by the way, Dominic Cummings. If you can mess up so many times and think that you cannot be held to account, then you are arrogant human beings. And the arrogance oozes from Boris Johnson. And you know where he learned that from? He learned that from Dominic Cummings. Dominic Cummings, from the start of his career in politics, had just been arrogant. He's been a man where in these speeches he gives, he talks down to people, he talks down about people, he has an extremist rhetoric, and that carries heavily into Boris Johnson's rhetoric, where Boris Johnson has said some extremist things, has not apologized for being an extremist with his views, especially on racial and social politics. The things he said about Muslim women, about black people, is just disgraceful. And now we see his supporters, feeling comfortable to talk about people in this way. This is the start of the decline of the Tory party, and I think people are glad to see it now. People are seeing through this facade. They didn't see it after Theresa May, after she spent her whole time lying through her teeth, not dealing with crazy situations that should have been dealt with straight away. I think people are now seeing through Boris Johnson, because who really is Boris Johnson? Boris Johnson was a man who was clowned by the whole world when he was London mayor. They saw him as this waffling, bumbling buffoon who cannot finish sentences properly, a man who cannot speak properly, a man who does not really have a moral backbone, a man who has this elitist mindset that trickles through his prime ministerial reign so far. Everything he's done in politics so far has molded him into the man he is today, and that is a prime minister of Britain. And this bumbling buffoon is now prime minister of Britain. How crazy is that? And today, in this press conference, you saw that bumbling buffoon right in front of your eyes. A man who had such contempt for the British people, a man who essentially said, I'm lying to you and you got to deal with it. And the outpour of emotion, anger, just this fight that the British people finally have. They've finally had enough of this rubbish that's just been thrown at them for the past few months. It's a disgrace and it's a scandal, yet another scandal for the Tories. And I think people have finally started to realise that it's one rule for us and another rule for them. But it's always been like that. But now the government are telling you to your face that it is one rule for them and one rule for us. So let's see what happens over the next few days. Let's see if it's going to be yet another Tory U-turn, because they've done quite a lot of that, haven't they? They've realised they're wrong quite a few times under Boris Johnson, and that is what might just save his job. That is what might just save the Tory party. But with a resurgent Labour under Keir Starmer, where a lot of Tory supporters are now looking at Keir Starmer's centrist, centre-right approach to politics and seeing that as an acceptable way of politics, we might see a massive shift in British politics very quickly if they don't get rid of Boris Johnson soon. And I think the Tories will, and that will be interesting to see. Anyway, that's all for today. Please join us next time, where we go through the biggest talking points in international politics. My name is Bilal Aziz. Thank you very much.